It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. What's up? What's happening? Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen, and with us again from Pro Football Focus, it's Mike Renner. Mike, what's up, man?
Hey, fellas. Great to be back. How you guys doing?
Great, man. Not as good as you. Where were you at, you said? Orlando?
I'm in Orlando. It is gorgeous out right now. It's about to get a little too hot, actually. I might have to go inside.
Yeah, Mike, for those listening and not watching on YouTube, Mike sitting outside at a coffee shop just casually podcasting with us is Logan. Logan's also in his daughter's room. I'm the only one who's in my usual podcast space, optimized for podcasting, but that's fine. So here's what we got today. Mike has put out a ton of stuff recently, 3-round mock on Pro Football Focus. Also, Logan, I know you were like the mock drafts are cool, but really prospect rankings is where I know your head's at these days. And Mike hit his top 150 the other day. So I say we just dive right in. Let's start with the 150. And Logan, where do you want to take this first? What do you think is the most interesting thing after looking at Mike's rankings?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of interesting things. I think the thing that stuck out to me was kind of the sequencing of players. You know, you had Deonte Banks above Joey Porter Jr. You had Anton Harrison above kind of, everyone's kind of third tackle, Broderick Jones. And I thought maybe, for Washington fans who are kind of dialed into those players specifically, could you talk a little bit about why you chose to do that and what were the distinguishing factors? They're not far apart, but, there's obviously a distinction.
Deonte Banks, to me, is one more versatile. And I think you saw that at Maryland. Like, it's almost hard to get a feel for him on tape because they ran so many different coverages. Whereas Joey Porter, you can see him just sticking at the line with receivers, enveloping them in press, and then that's, his bread and butter. And they let him play to those strengths. Whereas with Banks, you really have to watch him a little more to see the nuance to his game. And I just see a high end athlete. Like, the best at the cornerback position in this draft class, even more so than like Christian Gonzalez, in my opinion, just in terms of pure explosiveness and movement skills and agility and like the traits you want to see from a cornerback. Now, Gonzalez is a little maybe smoother and has a little bit better tape in terms of consistency, but Banks, that is a great starting point, for a cornerback. Whereas Joey Porter is more of just by corner standards, probably an average athlete by NFL starters in the league. And so I'm going to lean towards that guy. I'm going to lean towards those traits and what those can be. And just, again, the versatility aspect because, Joey Porter's great in press. I think he's lights out. You're getting a good press corner. But that's such a limited skill set in today's NFL that so few teams are doing that. He's probably going to go to a team that wants to do that, but so few teams are doing that. So many teams are moving their corners off, making them read quarterbacks, trying to put caps on these offenses. So I just think Banks is a little bit better in that regard. And then for Anton Harrison, I think he's kind of the guy who's been forgotten about in this tackle class. To me, he has better feet and better hand usage right now than Paris Johnson, than Broderick Jones. It's just Paris Johnson and Broderick Jones are like these monsters physically. Like Anton Harrison's not that. I don't think he's, is below like NFL play strength or thresholds in that regard or explosiveness thresholds, but he's just not a high-end athlete. But on the football field, the guy is skilled. And obviously he's started for 3 years compared to 1.5 years at tackle for those other two guys I mentioned. So, if I want pass protection right away, I think he's one of the better options in this draft class. It's probably Peter Skoronski and then him in terms of guys I would trust year one in pass pro. So,
yeah, I totally agree. I think that's something people sleep on with Harrison is just he's so skilled. He understands the line. He understands the anchor. And those are qualities that other players don't necessarily have, out in terms of guys that can play left tackle. And you mentioned Darnell Wright, or you talked about Darnell Wright in your 3-round mock. He's an outstanding football player. He's also got a good feel for pass protection. In your mock, he's the first guy to go off the board. I know a lot of people in Washington are excited about him here. Can you kind of elaborate as to why you felt that way? And what do you see on his film? Do you think he can play left tackle, or is he only a right guy?
So I think he could, but I don't know why you would want to. I think he did start 1 year at left tackle for Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. I think
it wasn't great, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. It wasn't, yeah. And then they flipped him back to right. And so, when that's the case, usually I'm of the opinion that you try to keep a guy in the same spot because, reps matter so much. And basically, like, it's not like shooting a basketball left-handed, but it's, like finishing at the rim with your opposite
Sure.
hand. It just feels weird for a tackle, and it could be a massive learning curve for a guy. So when he's already done a multi-year starter and his best play was at right tackle, I think you just keep him there. Why I had him the first tackle off the board is more fit. I think to Chicago, if you're a run heavier team, Darnell Wright offers a lot in a duo scheme, a scheme that's really going to hit guys right at the line of scrimmage and try to generate movement, because he's probably the best, the most explosive. He's 330. He's probably got 10, 15 pounds on every other tackle in this draft class, and he's just as explosive. So he can really move the line of scrimmage and really anchor in pass pro. And to Chicago, when you have a mobile quarterback, you get bull rushed, and you're working the running game is far more valuable. And he's not going to get bull rushed too much, and he's obviously going to be a force in the running game. So that's why I had him going there.
So a lot of Commanders fans, and I would say myself included here, are in the group of people who are confused at this point about position flex, because it is obviously a good thing in that you want guys who can fill multiple spots. But I think the Commanders have gone so heavy on position flex guys that it doesn't feel like they have anybody who can actually play one position well. It's like, oh, cool, they're mediocre everywhere. Yay. Who are the guys that you feel really solid about? Okay, day one starter at a single position on the offensive line. Like, if you're Washington at 16, like, who do you want available out of this top group? Obviously, Skoronski, it seems very unlikely he will be there. But even he's got some flex. But, like, okay, that guy's definitely either a great guard or an excellent tackle day one.
Mm-hmm. So you're asking which guys would I plug into one spot along the offensive line?
Or so maybe let's refine that question a little bit. Like, everyone thinks Darnell Wright is going at 16 would probably be too high because he only plays right tackle. But there is value there for guys that are really good at doing one thing. Mm-hmm. Do you knock guys for that?
I don't think I do. No, I think that's more of an interior offensive line trait, in my opinion, versatility. Because I don't, if you're a tackle and can play tackle well, who gives if you can play guard well? That tackle is the position you want, right? Like, everyone's searching. There's a reason all these tackles are probably going to go high in the drafts, because everyone needs them. There's just not 64 quality offensive tackles to go around. Whereas, a lot of tackles can kick inside and play guard. We saw that with Laramie Tunsil. It's like no one would call Laramie Tunsil a guard based on his skill set, but he goes to Miami and plays guard fine, because not to say it's easier, but it's just you're dealing with less space. It's not necessarily you're not getting challenged, and your chances of bad losses on the interior costing you is not the way it is on the edge, where having to manipulate space is very difficult. So I do think the guys who are tackle onlys, you're not knocking a guy for that whatsoever.
So is 16 too high for a guy like Darnell Wright, or another guy that's only a right tackle is DeJuan Jones? I heard Chris Collinsworth recently say he thought he play left. What I'm saying? Is that too high for that kind of player?
I don't think so. Because from a pure value perspective, right tackle is as valuable as left tackle. You're truthfully seeing the better rushers at right tackle more often than not. Teams know that right tackles around the league are usually lesser than the left tackles. So you're seeing the better rushers. The pressure that left tackle leads to sacks more when you get pressure, but right tackle leads to affecting actual passes more. We've done those studies. And so it's kind of like a pick your poison. And at the end of the day, most offenses, they are similar in value. So if you're right tackle only, but you're darn good at it, well, you're still, in my opinion, as valuable as a left tackle.
On the cornerback front, we will now reveal to the world that you made a whoopsie in your mock draft. We were talking before the show, and you're like, "Oh, I did put Joey Porter at 16. Not the guy necessarily that I would put there, because I've been saying all draft process, including on this podcast last time you were on, that's not necessarily the best fit." So how do you go about ranking these corners, knowing that, like, okay, for Washington, like, Porter's not necessarily a fit, even though he's very good at what he does. Banks, could go in the second round. We had him in our mock the other day at 16 in Washington. You just talked about how much you love the guy. So as you work on something like your rankings and then kind of take that into a mock draft, how do you start layering these corners?
Yeah, so in the mock, I was like, the logical guys off the board here are either Devin Witherspoon or Joey Porter. And because all the tackles had gone. And I was like, well, Devin Witherspoon's like really a man corner. I don't think he's purely a press guy, but he's like really a man skill set. And they just had a man skill set in William Jackson in Washington, and that they showed how well that worked out in that defense. And so while Porter's probably better in a man scheme, he's more just a press corner. And obviously that's still probably not a great fit for Washington. But again, they've made some mistakes in terms of evaluation of the cornerback position. So it's not the most unrealistic thing. But I do think Deontay Banks is a better fit there if we are debating between the two.
I'm surprised that you say Witherspoon is not a great fit. I feel like, so one of the things that I do when I look at corners is I say, like, how physical are they? How do they tackle? Because I feel like that translates really well to off coverage because you got to make all these tackles. And one of the things about Porter that I keep kind of, that makes me, because I like him, he's obviously a big freaky dude, but it makes me a little bit nervous is he's not a great tackler. Deontay Banks is a pretty good tackler. Witherspoon's a good tackler. Like, how do you weigh that in the evaluation? Because I would think that Witherspoon would translate better to an off corner just because he's a better tackler.
Yeah, he very well may, or definitely an off corner. Yeah, like we're talking off corner, he's a better off corner than Joey Porter. I just wanted him to more of a man scheme because he's so darn good at that, and that's like what Illinois did last year. So I don't.
You're
really
just biased. You're just biased. You're just biased. You're just trying to get him to fit to where you want him to do well, right? He's your baby at this point. You want him to do well in a man scheme. I get it.
That's what I did. I mean, that is what I did. I want him to go to. I mean, truthfully, to the Houston Texans because I think him and Derek Stingley is just like an awesome combo. That's like you. So how I do the mock drafts, how the sausage is made is I'm not just picking for everyone. I'm putting a guy where I want some fits I want at the first place, and then backfilling all the other ones. And that was just a fit I really wanted in this draft.
So I was going to give you a lot of props because I thought in your mock draft you did an excellent job because you got Joey Porter Jr., who to me is like in the same tier as Deontay Banks or Emmanuel Forbes, guys that I like a lot. And then at 48, you gave him Matthew Bergeron, who I think is a guy who can play tackle in the NFL. And then you gave him the safety from Illinois. And I was like, man, Mike's just hooking us up. But now I find out it's just some computer algorithm somewhere doing all the work for us.
It's not an algorithm. Come on. I gave you the versatile DB down at the end.
I'm saying I love him. I love all the picks, man. I was like, man, Mike, like, because he did the Take Command podcast. He's hooking it up. But apparently it's just like the computer spitting it out,
Bergeron was one where I was like that. So I didn't give him tackle round one. I said, the run on tackle is going to go early. That was one where in the second round, I penciled him in there. I'm like, that's one fit I want to go and I want to make happen because I think it would make a lot of sense for them. I think you can have that's where they got Sam Cosmi. I think that's a good spot for a tackle like that where it probably has guard versatility if you need him to play there.
Yeah, and so that's one thing I want to talk about is like it seems like the top of the tackle class is pretty dense and kind of dynamic compared to what it's been the last couple of years where there's always been these guys who are like more can play tackle but are probably guards. You get like, probably 6 guys that are tackles. But after Matthew Bergeron, it kind of, I don't want to say it falls off a cliff, but that's kind of how it feels, right? So how important is it that they get one of those top guys in this draft?
Yeah, that's the problem. And that's why I see him going highly is because the amount of day 2 tackles I like in this class is like Matthew Bergeron. And then that's it.
Right. No, I feel the same way.
And then, you have Wanya Morris from Oklahoma is probably going to go day 2. You have Carter Warren from Pittsburgh are probably going to go day 2 just because they have like the body types of tackles, but I don't think they are.
Their film's not bad. Like Carter, I think is interesting. He reminds me a little bit of Morgan Moses, kind of like a longer, taller guy who's got some polish, but it's definitely there for him if it works out.
Yeah, there's you see like the whatever it is at tackle that's just like the length movement skills combo, but it's not quite there. So that's how I feel about that kind of second. I guess I was saying second tier. That's like third tier of tackles in this draft class. It's just like I don't want that guy starting right away though, or even maybe starting year 2. It's just like a guy you get in the fold to hopefully year 3 he becomes something.
Logan, if they take Bergeron second round, guy who can play tackle, can play guard, like what's their starting offensive line look like next year? Like how do they shift the pieces around to make that a worthwhile pick?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I do think Bergeron, like when you watch him, he probably has some guard flexibility. And like in some ways he fits this identity here in Washington almost better than any of the top round guys because he does have this kind of guard tackle flexibility. He's a big body, big mover, kind of a run first guy. So I think he could easily play left guard. I don't think that's ideal, but he probably could, especially because you paid Wiley all that money to play tackle. So it's kind of like I think I think Wiley's an excellent guard. I would love to see him at guard. I'd love to see Bergeron at tackle. But if they feel comfortable with that arrangement, I think you feel good with a guy. You can kind of say, we need a spot at left guard. He's a big, physical son of a gun who plays football with the right type of mindset, who's going to be nasty, and we can insulate him with a run-first approach.
So you go Bergeron at left guard, Leno at left tackle for this year, and then maybe hopefully that gives Chris Paul another year.
Right.
Hopefully Paul's your left guard next year. Bergeron kicks out the left tackle. That's
that's
the
kind of what I would
plan.
say. And that you know, we were kind of poo-pooing position flexibility, but one of the things about it is it lets you kind of plan for the future a little bit better. You get your best 5 on the field. So for example, if you were to draft DeJuan Jones, right? He can only play tackle probably. So you're moving Wiley into guard. And if you don't love that arrangement, you're kind of accommodating a rookie player. So here the rookie, a younger player, new to the system, a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more gray matter, sponginess up there. Like let him kind of figure that out. I think that is probably the way I would go. And that's why a guy like Paris Johnson of the top guys is interesting, or Skaranski, because they have played guard. So again, that's where that position flex is valuable for a team like Washington.
I'm curious to your thoughts, Logan, on guys who kind of like what I brought up about Laramie Tunsil, like kind of getting a guy's feet wet by playing them at guard if they're not necessarily ready to start at left tackle in the NFL. Is that something that maybe you're teaching them bad habits by starting them at guard, or teaching them like a different position is only hurting them? Or do you think it's helping them kind of get acclimated to then they'll be ready once they have to step in at left tackle?
Well, I think it shows you what type of guy you have. And so what I mean by that is obviously the line for a guard is different. The speed is different. The anchor is different. And if a guy can play guard in the NFL, it means they're a tough son of a gun, in my opinion, who was playing tackle in college. And I think if you've got a tough son of a gun, I feel good about him playing anywhere, right? Because that's one of the things about Anton Harrison. Like, I love Anton Harrison, but he could not play guard in the NFL. He's just not physical enough right now. And so that's where I kind of say a year at guard for him, it would be trial by fire, but you're going to get a hard, tough, salty dude out of that. And I don't think he's physically capable of doing it. But that's why a guy like Matthew Bergeron, Paris Johnson, Cody Mock, another guy that I think is really interesting there, because he's got that toughness and that mindset to kind of be adaptable. And you are teaching them bad habits, but if you got that flexibility, like I think about some of the best tackles I played with, like Trent Williams is a little bit cheating, but also the best guard that I played with was Trent Williams. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's a freak, and it helps you see kind of what kind of athlete they are. So I think there's an advantage, but I also think it can be tough and it can burn a guy down if they just physically can't get it done, if that makes sense.
Trent Williams hates playing guard.
Well, I mean, I would too. It's going to cost him financially, so don't play guard, Trent.
There was that year where they had a billion. I mean, there's so many years where they had a billion injuries, but like that was the talk of like they had Ty and Secchi, and it was like, well, Ty can't play guard. He's too big. Trent's going to have to play guard. And Trent was basically like, hell no, that 6'9" dude is going to get down in that guard stance because I'm not doing that crap anymore. Which, you know, I guess it worked out kind of.
We used to have Will Montgomery on staff at PFF.
Great dude. Okay.
Awesome dude.
Yeah.
He would tell me stories about Trent, and he was like, Will would be prepping for the guys all week that he was going to go up against, would like be having all these notes, and Trent wouldn't do a single damn thing. And he'd ask him why one time, and he's like, I'm going to make them play my game. He was like, oh, God damn it. I wish I was a physical enough dude to make them play my game.
So I've told this story in the podcast before, but I remember we were in training camp. We just came out of a joint practice, I want to say, with like Houston or New England, something like that. And I'm on the bus and I'm dying. I'm sore. I'm hot. And Trent's just sitting there. And, you know, we're the same draft year, so we're pretty close. And he's talking to me. And I was like, man, I'm like really stressed out about tomorrow's practice. And he looked at me, he's like, you know what, man, if football was ever hard for me, I'd probably just retire. And like that was the end of the conversation. I was like, sick. This is good. This is where we want to be right now. Every day I'm fighting for my life, and it's easy for you. So anyway,
that's an all-time quote.
That is.
I'm
so
sure he probably feels differently now. But like the other thing about Trent, I got to say this. I got to defend my guy. Is, you know, I would study a ton. Will would study a ton, but Trent just had like this natural kind of feel for the game. Like we'd be in there and I'd be lined up next to him and be like, hey man, watch the Sam Strong safety. And I'd look up and I'd be like, it is Sam Strong safety, you know? And so like, even though he didn't study a ton, he just like had that in the bag. So, you know, not only was he genetically very gifted, but he was intellectually very gifted. And that's why you're one of the best tackles in the history of the NFL. So, you know, not a lot of those guys in this year's draft, but when you can get one, you should get one.
Yeah. Or any other draft. He's one of them.
Correct.
All right, let's talk quarterbacks. This happened in our mock. It's happened in a lot of other mocks. Happened in your mocks. You had Levis sliding farther than anybody else that I've seen, all the way down to 22. The Rams trading up to get him and end his slide there. Most people kind of have his floor 19 to Tampa. I kind of like your approach though, what you did with Tampa, of saying like, yeah, they don't necessarily need to figure out quarterback now. They're just going to rebuild the roster for a couple years. And be bad, and that means you get higher draft picks and can better rebuild your roster. Not that they'll be great with Will Levis, but you get the point. So rather start that quarterback contract farther down the line. How has Anthony Richardson separated himself from Levis? And also kind of when you think about Levis as the fourth guy now, what's his ceiling, what's his floor?
I think it's just landing spot there. And that's always with quarterbacks, right? There's not a lot of people I know who have C.J. Stroud QB1, but I think he's going number one overall because just Carolina thinks he fits them better. But and that's what with Indy. I think Indy's, Chris Ballard is one of, if not the most traits-driven GM with his draft track record. He's always chasing the highest end athletes possible, and you won't find one higher end than Anthony Richardson, right? So I think that's like a fit with that. And then with Levis, it's kind of just so many guys or so many teams have got their guy, whether it's Vegas signing Jimmy G, whether it's Atlanta claiming they're in on Desmond Ridder, and then Seattle, Detroit just being kind of in a window, right? Like they can win now, those teams. And they have quarterbacks who maybe aren't, quote unquote, franchise guys, but they're close. They're like right on that edge of, are they franchise guys? Are they not? And in the NFC right now, they think they're maybe a Jalen Carter or Tyree Wilson away from maybe winning it because how weak the conference is. So then after that, it's like, is Tennessee going to draft them? Is probably like one of the one spots. But I think Tennessee, truthfully, is going to stink this year. And if they're stink this year, that means they're in next year's quarterback class. So I don't see the desperation for them to go get it. And they just had kind of a developmental project guy in Malik Willis last year. So then it keeps going. And then you got the Texans aren't going to take when they already took one. You got the Jets. Patriots, Packers, Washington's like the one where are they? But I think they've said that they don't want to do this again. They don't want to do this quarterback carousel thing again. So then you got really a slide. So I had the Rams trading up because of obviously the fit there with Liam Cohen, who's now back at Kentucky, but the OC was his OC back in 2021 when he had his best season. Obviously, this probably talked him up to Rams brass. So that's how I see it kind of playing out. No one knows, though. I think no one's really tipping their hand at quarterback besides obviously the Panthers because there's no reason not to for them. But it will obviously dictate kind of the rest of the first round, how those play out.
So Ron Rivera sat down with you guys at the Combine and someone said like, oh, we have a really high draft grade on Sam Howell. And now he has gone and parroted that. He's like, I'd sit down and do these interviews and everyone tells me how much they love Sam Howell too. But if you take what you thought of Howell last year and kind of a year of progress being in a system or being in the NFL, obviously it'll be a different system under Bieniemy, but that prospect, what Sam Howell will be versus Will Levis, how do you compare those two? Because that's ultimately the question Washington is going to be asking if Levis is on the board.
I had Howell's QB1 last year's class. Now, the ultimate PFF board, after I got together with everyone, I ceded to them and put Malik Willis ahead of him. But I thought his tape was awesome. I think his tools are awesome. I just think the offense he was in and sort of, and the fact that it really didn't teach him how to play quarterback, and the fact that he's 6 foot tall, which is still, an issue for a lot of guys in the NFL, were the big things holding him back. And truthfully, falls to the fifth, but he really wasn't a fifth round. I don't care who you were evaluating his tape. He was much better than that. It's just quarterback is kind of a binary thing where some teams will, some teams won't draft one. And so he falls to the end of the pack. I think the tools are there to be, again, like a high-end NFL starter. His deep ball is as good as I've seen in this year's class or last year's class on tape at North Carolina. That was his bread and butter. And you saw in the start he had at the end of the year was throwing some dimes in there down the football field. So I just think he was a guy who really needs to get acclimated to the NFL game, and glad he got some reps in last year. So I would not, if I'm staring between him and Will Levis, and with Will Levis, you're obviously going to have to, you're kind of, I don't want to say giving up on Sam Howell, but it's you only get so much practice time to develop two guys. You need both those guys to get serious developmental time in. I just think it's probably you got to choose one or the other. You can't have two guys in that kind of mold on one roster.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting because, like Will Levis is kind of that bigger, arm strength's probably similar, kind of that he gets a lot of Josh Allen comparisons, which I hate because it's like Josh Allen's is like, he's the outlier, he's the unicorn.
Yeah.
It's like, so, but I mean, like, is there a world where they take him at 16 and you would be like, I get it? Or is it like, it just doesn't make sense with Sam Howell on the roster?
They know Howell better than I do, right? Like they've seen him, they know what they got in some way, shape. And I think a lot of the reason he fell last year was because of his injuries and because of how he just basically, like, I've heard people like was not good on a whiteboard coming out, like flat out didn't know a lot of stuff. And obviously some of that's like just what he was asked to do at North Carolina. So they know the development he's made over the past, 8 months. And if he really hasn't, and they do draft Will Levis, that's, obviously a damning sign for a guy like Sam Howell. So I wouldn't hate, I will never blame a team for taking more shots at quarterback when you don't have a quarterback. It's the most valuable position. You're not going to win with, a below average quarterback in today's NFL. Just flat out will not win a Super Bowl. So if we have that, if you don't have a above average one, take as many chances as possible. So I wouldn't blame them. Again, it would be an indictment of Sam Howell then if they did.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, for sure, 100%. Another thing that the Washington Commanders need is probably a little bit of linebacker depth. This year's linebacker class is unique, to say the least, right? There's kind of like two guys who can come in and play a lot, I think, right away. Interesting, in your mock, you kind of had, I think Henley's your number one guy on your 150 board. Jack Campbell goes first, and Henley's like your third guy off the board. Can you talk about that position group, why you made that switch from the big board to the mock draft? And then are there some guys later in the draft that you think could fill a need, potentially start for Washington?
Yeah, so with this linebacker class, it's not good. You called it unique. I'd call it bad. It's just not. Henley and Campbell, though, I think Campbell's your safest linebacker pick in this draft. He's very reminiscent of like Logan Wilson coming out as a prospect, in my opinion.
I like that comp,
where he's just like, he's good at a lot of different things. Is he great at anything? Probably not. But you're getting a good linebacker who's going to finish plays, who's a good tackler. And so if you're the Commanders and, you could use some security at that position, you chase the high end of Jamin Davis, and it's been a roller coaster so far. You could use a guy next to him that you just feel good about. So that would be the guy I would put a pin in and be like, that's, one guy I'd really want for them, and especially in the weak linebacker class.
At 48? Would you take him at 48?
I'd take him at 48. It's 45 on the PFF draft board, so I'd take him there for sure.
Do you think he sneaks into the first round? Sorry to cut you off, because I know I've seen some mocks where he's like, going to the Bills at 23 or something.
That would surprise me. That would very much surprise me. I just don't think he fits the traits profile of a first-round linebacker. But so that's him. Henley is probably the best coverage player at the linebacker position in this draft. Just the most refined already, and he's a tremendous tackler too. Super twitched up dude, but he's 225, and so. That's already, he's never going to be a take-on guy. He plays around blocks. He's your weak side linebacker in a defense, and you're kind of the guy who you'll kick out over the slot and whatnot. That's his role. But I think he's damn good at that. And for being a former quarterback, former wide receiver, like he knows how route concepts get put together and where his eyes need to go for the next thing. So that's why he's top linebacker on the PFF board, because I think that's a super valuable skill set. But even he's not the athlete that, say, Trenton Simpson is from Clemson, who's just unbelievable physically. Like his testing is on par with, like a guy like Joey Porter. Like truthfully, his best position may even be cornerback, like a man system, because he is so gifted athletically. And then Drew Sanders is kind of your off-ball blitzing type. I would not recommend drafting Drew Sanders unless you have a plan to rush the passer with him around 10 times a game, because that's the skill set that he brings to the table that's just unique, in that he's a former edge rusher, really comes downhill with authority and knows how to beat blocks. Is just a guy who, when he's out in space, he still looks kind of like a former edge rusher. So that's kind of the top. That's like the four linebackers that'll come off the board somewhere, either maybe sneak in the first round, somewhere on day two. I would be surprised if we really see anyone else in that mix of a top 75 pick.
So the thing with linebacker for Washington that I struggle with is what exactly are they looking for? Because Davis, roller coaster for sure, but that roller coaster finished on a nice climb by the end of last year. Like he really played well at the end of the year, and he was doing it at Mike linebacker, calling the signals with the green dot, everything. So are you comfortable with him there moving forward, and you're trying to find someone to play next to him? And by the way, they're probably only going to play two most of the time. Like, sure, they might go back to having a base defense more this year if they have some guys they feel can fit that Sam spot, but they'll probably just play most of the nickel and Buffalo nickel type of stuff. Or are you looking to kick Jamin back to a weak side player where you can just run and hit, and getting a guy who can call signals? And I maybe you do that depending on who's available to you. If you really like one of the guys in the draft that fits one of those spots, and you kick Jamin and position flex strikes again. But I would think that you would prioritize putting Jamin where you want him because you spent a first round pick on him 2 years ago.
Yeah, the only guy I would say would usurp him as the Mike would be Campbell in this class. Everyone else, I'd rather have the weak side position.
Yeah, I was about to say, because there's some guys later that are kind of these high upside plays on your list. You know, Dorian Williams from Tulsa, Overshown from Texas. Marty Mapu, I think, is a safety, but he'll probably play, I think, probably will linebacker. Like, can you talk a little bit about those guys? Because I think that's kind of where Washington's going to pick. I think in your mock, you did a really good job of kind of finding players that they need and filling, I don't say needs because they did a good job in free agency, but I think more players of higher positional value. And I think they're going to fall, unfortunately, into these kind of guys at linebacker. Can you talk a little about them and what you think about them? And then, because to me, these are all will linebackers, kind of to your point.
Yeah, I mean, all of them were sub 230, I believe, at the combine or their pro days. All are coverage first, run and hit, not take on players. Now, the interesting one of that group was, to me, is Dorian Williams, because he's got a unique physical build. Like, he's got some of the broadest
So you said
shoulders.
Unique too. You said unique. There's some unique stuff there. Yeah, one guy.
He's got like a 6'10" wingspan. This guy.
I know he's fast too. He plays like a
is.
safety kind of. You know, he's
and I think he turns his hips really well and runs down the field. So he's like a true weak side guy. He's top 100 player on the PFF board. Overshown's a little bit more just sloppy, I'll say.
Yeah, like edge rusher. Like he kind of reminds me of like a less good Sanders. You know what I mean? Like kind of more comfortable blitzing and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, he just, like, when he gets going at full speed, those are his best reps. But when he's kind of having to play, you know, kind of in a silo where he's got to just kind of play flat-footed, you see him, the wheels turning, and he just doesn't know what's going on. So he's an interesting, though, athlete for sure. The one guy that I would like a lot as like a pure weak side guy who reminds me a lot of Malcolm Rodriguez is Ivan Pace Jr. from Cincinnati.
Get out of here. I was going to ask you about this specifically, man. You gotta sell me on this. I need a good pitch.
I mean, he's fast. I think he went 4.61 in his pro day, but at the Senior Bowl, he had the fastest GPS time.
He's also like 5'6",
and he is 5'10". He's not, you know, again, he's not going to play man coverage with this guy. He's going to get bodied.
How long are his arms, Mike?
I think they were 30 inches on the dot, or maybe a little bit more than that.
I thought they were like 48 or something like that.
No, they weren't that. But he's got a 6-foot wingspan, which would make him I think Rodriguez was even just a little bit longer in terms of his wingspan. So one of the lowest. But man, he as a pure run and hit, there's few guys in this draft class. At the Senior Bowl, in the actual game, he put Osiris Torrance in the run game on a rep. He's an absurdly physical dude, but he's probably more better for like a pure blitzing scheme just because he's got to be protected and coverage, that guy.
And I will say they do a lot of coverage with the linebackers here. Can you talk about Marty? What's his name? Marty Mapu? Is that right? Because when I watch his film, I love him. Oh no! Did he really? No, it's terrible.
He just tore his pec last week. So yeah, he tore his pec. He was probably fringe top 100 guy prior. Tore his pec. He played like the overhang role for Sacramento State and some safety. It was not a linebacker, but like physical enough that you're projecting that linebacker, even though he's, I think, 216, but just real smooth and like the change of direction ability that is difficult to coach. And then to me, with size, it obviously matters at linebacker, but it's more play style. And that's a lot of positions, right? It's how physical do you play? Are you you could be 240 and be soft as hell in the run game, and you can be 215 like Darius Leonard and still be an impact player in the run game. So to me, he trends more towards the latter, where he comes and wants to hit guys. And so again, there's things you still can't do at that size, but very intrigued by him again. Though the torn pec is probably going to knock him pretty far down for it, because that basically takes him out.
Tight end and running back, super interesting classes. And the Commanders keep getting mentioned at both positions because they just have a bunch of interesting guys at tight end, and also Logan Thomas, who's interesting, obviously, from an injury recovery standpoint. Like, is he still the guy they signed a couple years ago that's good? Or is he more of the declined player that we saw last year coming off the ACL? Then they got all these traits guys. Running back's obvious because they've only really got two top guys. They've got a couple other guys, later round picks, Jared Patterson types. But this is a super deep class at both positions. Let's start at running back. Like, after Bijan, who is going to go in the first round somewhere because he's arguably the best player in the entire class, just take the positional value out of it, top 5 for sure. How long until the next guy goes, and how deep is that next tier?
It's deep, man. This running back class is awesome. I think Gibbs comes off the board somewhere top of the second, the Alabama running back. And then you'll just see like A-Chain probably comes, Texas A&M back probably comes off somewhere in the second, early third. I think Charbonnet is probably a third. UCLA running back. I think Bigsby's probably going somewhere in that range. The Auburn running back, Tulane running back, Tajay Spears somewhere like ended second round, top of third round. Like, there's a ton of talent. I think I had 13 guys in this class who would have been top 5 guys in last year's draft class. It's very deep, and so. It is the most top 100 players I've had on a PFF draft board at running back. I'm looking right now, 8 top 100 guys, and we hate running backs here. So that's a wild number. I think there was only 3 last year. So it's a super deep class. And I think the one thing Washington's missing is, like, they have 2 big dudes. Like, maybe Antonio Gibson doesn't play big, but he's still like, 228, 230. Like, they have big ass running backs. They don't have one dynamic kind of jitterbug, but this class is chock full of them. So the guys in that mold that I kind of just said, Gibbs is in that mold. I think A-Chain's in that mold. I think Tajay Spears from Tulane's in that mold. Even Deuce Vaughn from Kansas State's an intriguing guy in that mold. Zach Evans from Ole Miss is an intriguing guy in that mold. There's just so many guys that I think one of those that I just mentioned, if they're on the board in the 4th or somewhere in day 3, you almost have to pull the trigger just to add that to your offense, to give you one more chess piece in your arsenal.
Yeah, and they need that like scat back type. Obviously McKinnon's still floating out there, I think, at this point in free agency, who's got the familiarity with the enemy system. But getting a young guy would obviously be great. And then tight end, I mean, Logan, you have 11 guys that you said are starting grades on?
Yeah, they could. I mean, it depends on the kind of system and like where they're going to be. But like, to me, a starting caliber tight end is like a blocking Y. And I know that's like the second guy on your depth chart, but like if he's got that skill set, like he's going to play minutes for your team. So 11's probably like, I think probably generous, but like there's some dudes that are big, strong, physical guys. And so when I was looking at your list, actually, I was surprised to see, not a ton of guys, not a ton of tight ends in that top 150. I think it was 8, maybe 6, if I remember correctly. I don't have it right in front of me, but
9 top 150.
Oh, well, maybe I miscounted then. That's on me.
Maybe Logan's just bad at math.
That's on me.
One at 150. So.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But I also, not to start a fight here, but I don't really value the Y blocking tight end.
You shouldn't value it, but like teams need it, right? So it's like it's kind of one of those positions where it's like John Bates, for example, like in the 4th, 5th round, like he's playing 60% of the snaps for Washington, right? And so you want a guy who's can pass protect, can run block, and so obviously you're in the 150 stuff. You're looking for those dynamic kind of game-changing players. 100% agree with that. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that there are guys that kind of fit your flavor of your team and can fit needs, is what I'm saying.
Yes. But the class is sick, and not just like deep. I think there's more top-end talent this year's class than any since probably 2018. And even I like the top of this better than probably even 2018.
Oh, really? So one of the things about your 150 is you had, I think Darnell Wright, like in this, I don't want to, it's not in front of me, like in the
68.
60s,
Pick 68.
yeah, that's what I
Or
thought.
number 68.
And so I know a lot of people, I don't disagree with that necessarily, but can you explain why that is and why do you have the other two guys above him? And Sam Laporta, I think, was also kind of in that mix as a guy that was above him. I like his film a lot more than Darnell Wright's, but can you give us
Darnell Washington, just for
Darnell
clarity.
Washington, sorry. Yep, sorry.
So it comes down to, skill set, right? Darnell Washington, at what he does, you probably won't find a better player in that mold, right? He is as good of, and I don't think he's like super polished as a run blocker, but he's 6'7", 270 with like a 7-foot wingspan, where it doesn't take much, it doesn't take much polish for that guy to make an impact. And you see him on the move, like hawk down DBs, and that's where his best blocks are, truthfully, is when he gets a hand on a safety or a corner. Those guys crumple like they do against offensive linemen. So I think that's where he's really at his best. But he's not a separator, and for as big a wingspan as he has, he's not really a go up and get it type of tight end. And I think he had like a 29-inch vertical at comp. Like he is kind of a ground player. He is a guy who is, he can run your, overs, seams, flats, do that, and then make a little after the catch. But if I have, a safety on him in man coverage, I'm looking elsewhere, because I don't think he's not going to get off man coverage. He's not going to separate. There's a reason why all his highlights are him just in space, jumping over dudes, and not running routes the way Kincaid and Mayer's highlights are. So that's the big thing with me, is that just, do I ever see him catching more than, 50 balls and 700 yards in a season?
Sure.
I'd be floored if he did. Whereas Kincaid, yes. Michael Mayer, 100%. Sam Laporta, 100%. Luke Musgrave, maybe not, but he's unique in the speed that he brings to the table as a vertical threat that I'll take that first.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Musgrave as well, because he's an athletic freak for his size, and again, those traits are things that get you excited. Another guy that I wanted to just bring up, because I think Washington's also looking for kind of a rotational edge rusher, and a guy that I like a lot in this class is Keon White out of Georgia Tech. Right, you got him sliding a little bit on your board. Talk about that a little bit. I heard on the big PFF show you mentioned that he ran a slow 40. If it's the same 40 that Cam Jordan ran, like how do you kind of what I'm saying? He's not an elite athlete, but he's a big, strong, physical dude that I think fits this system here in Washington really well. So again, I'm probably valuing him more because of the system fit, but go ahead.
Yeah, so he's somewhat new to the position. He started at tight end.
I knew I liked him.
I think it's 4 years. I think he's 4 years as a defensive end at this point. But he's 6'5", 281, 34-inch arms. Like that's he can do a lot of different things in your defense, because he is athletic enough to line up out wide and be, a pure wide nine bull rusher. But then he can go up and go head to head with an offensive tackle, and there's that versatile aspect to him. But just he looks, on tape at least to me, just like you don't see that athleticism show up every snap. Like he's super high-end athlete, a straight line speed guy. He can hawk down people in space, but you don't see him getting off the line like suddenly and getting onto dudes and then playing, just like everything is a little lethargic.
Deliberate.
Not urgency. Yeah, there you go. Deliberate. Great word. So that's just how I see him as a prospect. That
a little bit more developmental. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Definitely more in that realm, and that's why
because he does flash. He does have these moments where he flashes. He'll make a tremendous play. He'll blow up a guard. But you're right. The consistency down to down isn't necessarily there.
And if you're a developmental guy, well, you better be, a 4 at that size. You better be running a 4.6 something, 4.7. You better. So his 10 split was a 1.69.
Oh.
4.79. Like you better have a little bit more than that for me to go to bat high on for a developmental guy in that moment, right? You better be damn good as an athlete. And then testing wise, he just flat out wasn't, unfortunately.
Oh, okay. Yeah. And so in addition to Keon White, kind of in that 3rd, 4th round range, I know we did this last time and you were kind of still finishing your evaluations. Are there guys in there that you like for Washington, kind of guys that jump off the tape a little bit? You say, wow.
I like Isaiah McGuire a lot. He's a Missouri.
The Missouri kid?
Yes.
All right. Talk about him. Let's hear it.
Oh yeah, that reaction you told me you didn't.
Well, no, because I've heard you mention. So I consume a lot of PFF's content. I consume a lot of your content. I've heard you talk about him. I just haven't got to him yet. So if you're gonna pitch me on a guy that I haven't seen, what's the pitch? Is the question.
My pitch is he's bendy. I think that's a unique flexibility is a great trait to have on the edge, in that he can not only, from a standstill, get like his hands above his eyes and really, lift up an offensive tackle. But then once he gets around the edge, or gets to the edge of an offensive tackle, like he's underneath them and getting back to the quarterback for, a guy in the 270 sort of range of power defensive ends, which that just gives you a high floor, in my opinion. So he's not going to go highly because I don't think he's necessarily, your explosive athlete that you project to be, 10 sack plus guy. But if you're Washington and you want that third guy to just be sound in a lot of different, you want him to be good in the run game. You want him to be able to at least, push the pocket. And I think he can do both those things.
Nice.
All right, Mike, what's your life like over the next 3 weeks? We're taping this on Thursday, April 6th, meaning you got exactly 3 weeks to the draft.
Well, so truthfully, March is usually the worst for me because that's when I'm doing guide. That's when I'm grinding tape all the time and have to react to the combine, and you still have a lot of hits. Now it's just I'm doing a ton of podcasts, a ton of writing, which is kind of like icing on the cake. I don't need to necessarily grind. So this is the fun part for me, and then May is the really fun part. But this time of year is just like I get to enjoy and see where these guys end up.
They don't make you do like a 2024 list the day after.
And do they? I actually enjoy that more. Like, it's not a grind for me because I get to watch guys and just not care. Like, I get to watch them for pure fun. I don't have to take notes, and I don't have to be typing into my Google Sheet all the stuff that I want to say about them. It's just, I'm like, hey, he's good. Let's put him in. This guy's good. This guy's not good. Let's put him in. Like, it's just, I get to just be yes or no on guys, put him in my first round mock for next year.
Do you have a 7 round mock?
I need to go back and look at last year's to see.
That'd be a fun exercise.
Right.
That'd be good.
It's probably not a lot.
Is this the last mock draft you do, or will you do one more?
I do one more first round day before the draft. So that's it.
No 7 round.
I'll go to 7 rounds. Huh? Yeah. I'm not a psychopath. They've asked me, and I told them I'm just no. Like I don't have
too many picks. Too many picks.
It's not worth it. It's usually worth the sweet.
What would be even more fun, by the way, with your 2024, or like looking back at last year's, is like look back at yours, look back at like McShay's, see who else did one, and just take notes. Yeah. Like draft mock year out mock wars. That's what we're here for. We're here for the drama.
Yeah. I'm looking right now. Oh no, I had some awful picks. We're not even going to talk about it.
All right.
What's the worst one? What's the worst one? What's the worst one on there?
We had Arik Gilbert going top 10.
Whoa, guy. High on him last year.
I assumed he would get his head on straight, which never ended up happening.
Obviously didn't happen, so.
Turned out he showed up 300 pounds to camp, and then that was that.
Dude.
But that's why it's a fun exercise.
It's why you gotta watch the tape and have it all in, because guys move around. You can read all of Mike's stuff at Pro Football Focus. Obviously, subscribe to their podcast as well. They do a bunch of great YouTube content, so make sure you subscribe to their YouTube page, which we'll link in the description, both of the podcast and on YouTube. Mike, this was great, man. Maybe we'll talk to you after the draft. We'll talk to you during May Fun Time.
For sure, fellas. Be happy to do it.
Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.